I recently got a Fujifilm X-Pro2. I used it on a daily basis for the past 2 months, and I'm here to give you my first impressions of this camera. The first thing that I love about this camera is the straight out of camera JPEG files. The Fujifilm Recipe JPEGs look very well edited. It has a distinct look, but somehow it looks natural. I normally edit very lightly when it comes to my daytime photos. I feel that when I touch it up just a tad bit too much, it looks overdone. But with the Fujifilm Recipe JPEG files, even with the very distinct look that it has, it doesn't look overdone. It just looks good. Your style can be defined by how you compose, what you like to shoot, the genre, and etc. But it can also be how you edit and use colors. And the film simulation mode and recipes allow you to gain a whole new style. When you first start out photography, it is really difficult to learn how to edit. One little touch here and there, and you could be over-editing your photos. You need to go through lots of tutorials, trial and error, and develop an eye, but it takes really long time. But with film simulation recipes, it is instantaneous and more importantly, consistent. I love editing photos, but I can't stop raving about the film simulation mode. And the newer these Fujifilm cameras get, they have more film simulation modes. The X-Pro2 has enough for me, but I do wonder about Eterna, which is a new film simulation mode that comes out in later camera models. Download the Fuji Weekly app or watch YouTubers who use Fujifilm gear. You will come across lots of really usable recipes. Next thing that I love about this camera is weather sealing. This was one of the biggest selling points for me. I love to go out in the rain to shoot photos, but with the Ricoh GR3X, I do worry about it a bit when taking it out in the rain because it is not weather sealed. And in pouring rain, it did show me some glitches. But with this camera, I don't have to worry about that. I only have 2 cameras that can do this, the Sony a7R III and the Fujifilm X-Pro2. It recently rained here in Seoul, South Korea, so I had a blast taking this thing out in the rain. I am still on the market for these moderately old cameras, and in the process, I found that weather-sealed cameras are very hard to come by, especially in a package that looks and performs as good as this. I'm on the market for the XE series as well because I want to try it for its small size, but it's not weather-sealed, so I'm a bit hesitant to pull the trigger. Next thing that I love is the image quality. I'm a little hesitant to say what I'm about to say because I know how Fujifilm fanboys be, and I just want to make this clear that I'm not bashing this camera's sharpness. But I come from Sony a7R III, which is a full-frame camera, and I recently used the Sony RX1, which has this great 35mm size lens. Those cameras are sharp, and I mean really sharp. So compared to those cameras, I don't think the Fujifilm X-Pro2 paired with the TT Artisan's 27mm lens is the sharpest camera that I own. But that is not to say that I don't like the image quality or it is not sharp at all. It has a softer image that is pleasing to the eye, and paired with the Fuji colors, it has very little of the digital harshness we see with very sharp lenses. It hits that sweet spot, so I love the images coming out of this camera. The next thing I like about this camera is the hybrid viewfinder. The X-Pro2 has a very cool feature. If you pull on this lever, it switches from optical to electronic viewfinder. And if you push on this lever, then in the corner of your frame, it shows a magnified view of your focus point. I use the optical viewfinder because I like the retro feeling of using it. It's like using an old film camera. Or if EVF is more your thing because what you see is what you get, you can easily switch it. I use this feature as well. Of course, you won't keep switching back and forth from optical to electronic viewfinder. You will find one that you like and you will stick with it most of the time, but it is a very cool feature to have because, to my understanding, no other companies are doing this. Next is good enough autofocus. Fujifilm cameras don't have a good reputation for their autofocus. You get this camera for its colors, right? Especially with the latest firmware update on the newer cameras, the autofocus has gone crazy, or so I hear. But I was pleasantly surprised with this camera's autofocus. I expected it to search in and out on every focus, but it is not like that. And the spot focus point is really small, so I think that helps with the speed of the autofocus. Along with the lens being 27mm, which is a little wide. Unless you're shooting at night at darker focus points, which I do pretty often, you won't complain too much about the autofocusing speed. Next thing that I like is that it sounds good and it looks good. This comes later on my list for a reason because I don't care too much about looks and sounds when it comes to cameras, but some people do, so I thought I'd include it. Especially the shutter sound because you can easily check out how it looks online, but it is harder to check out how it sounds. So here we go. That's how it sounds. I come from Sony full frame camera, and it sounds alright, but it is too loud for my taste, since I'm a street photographer who likes to shoot without being noticed. So the X-Pro2 is perfect. It is quiet. Not silent, but quiet, and it has a very satisfying shutter sound. And when I'm out on the street, people don't really notice the camera for its sound, but I get to hear it every time, so that is good. And it looks good. I love rangefinder style cameras, so I feel cool carrying it around with me. I don't feel the same way when I'm carrying the Ricoh GR3X. I feel invisible with that camera, which is a good thing in its own way, but I don't feel cool with it. What can I say? Fujifilm makes some of the best looking cameras. Next thing I like is the analog dials. Intuitive and easy dials that helps with manual shooting or partially manual shooting. I don't need to go into the menu to quickly change the settings. I can use the external dials. At night, I know the minimum shutter speed I want is 1/25th of a second, so I keep it at that. And in daytime, I'm in aperture priority mode, anywhere between f5.6 to f11, and I never had any trouble shooting. And next, it's light. Despite its size, it's very light. I have TT Artisan 27mm lens, which weighs next to nothing, and when I have it around my shoulders, it is much lighter than it looks, so it is easy to carry it around as my daily carry. Now let's get into the couple of things that I don't like about this camera. The first thing that I don't like about this camera is the lack of articulating or a flip screen. This one hurts me deeply. I love to shoot from the hip. It provides a new and different perspective, which I think is more interesting than the perspective from eye level. Of course, I can crouch down and use the viewfinder, which would be like shooting from the hip, but I will look very obvious taking photos. Shooting from the hip lets you be a bit more discreet because you're looking down at your camera and not holding it to your eye. With everything right about this camera, the one huge thing that it missed the mark with is its lack of articulating or a flip screen. It is a larger camera, so I think being a tad bit thicker to have a flip screen would have made this camera next to perfect. I still shoot from the hip regardless, but I do miss the focus or miss the compositions from time to time. And the next thing that I don't like about this camera is the size. I knew this going in, so I didn't love to include this, but I just wanted to let you know that this is not a small camera. You won't really go unnoticed shooting in the street. One thing lots of people struggle with in street photography is being self-conscious and being scared of confrontation or getting noticed. And this is not a small enough camera to help with that. So even if you don't really get noticed because honestly people just don't care, you feel like you're getting noticed because of the size of this camera. If it had a flip screen, it will help the situation out a lot because you're looking down at your camera as you shoot. But all in all, I think it has been a while since I had a camera review with such a short list of cons. So that goes to show you how good this camera is. I've used a few used cameras recently myself, and this one is definitely up there. Although it is 8 years old, it has lots of film simulations to choose from, and almost infinite amount of Fujifilm recipes. It is not out of style because it looks really similar to the X-Pro3, which is the newest version of this camera, and it has a very satisfying shutter sound. It has weather sealing, great image quality, and interchangeable lens system unlike the X100 series. So would I recommend this camera? It is a definite yes. You really can't go wrong with it, and you get to save a lot of money by going with the X-Pro2 instead of the X-Pro3. You will save around $600 here in South Korea. When I was using this camera, I never felt that it was lacking because it was an 8-year-old camera. I couldn't tell from the image quality either. If you love to shoot with a viewfinder, this camera would be heavenly. I love the optical viewfinder experience. So there you have it. If you own one, keep it. If you don't have one, get one. It will be one of the best photography cameras you can buy. Everyone is just in love with this camera, and it is already very hyped up, so I thought how good could it be? But it has exceeded most of my expectations, and I love to use this camera and the images I get out of it. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for sticking around and watching this video. I really appreciate it. I post gear reviews, POV street photography videos, and tutorials from time to time. If this video helped you out in any way, please like and subscribe because it really helps out small channels like mine. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.